Our objective with the body sculpting is to create some contours, maybe a little bit of organic look to it, but also some functional reliefs as well. So typically on a guitar body there's going to be an arm relief right in this area. You can see that's kind of scrapey and scratchy right there, so we'll oftentimes remove a little bit of material here to create a little relief for the arm. And then also on the back side here is what we call a belly cut. So that gives us a little bit of room for our bellies, and some need more than others, but nevertheless, we would have a little sculpture there. Anything else that you want to do is really just purely aesthetic rather than functional. But we do need to be extra careful about where we're not going to remove material. Okay, so we have some what we call no-fly zones on the guitar body. So all of this area right around in here on the back side is of course going to be no-fly, because that's where we're going to have a metal plate there. Our neck plate is going to be mounted there, and we need to have a nice flat surface for that to set on. So we don't want any contouring there. Also, anybody that does any routing, so for instance this body here has not been routed yet. If it was to be routed, the routing would come up into this region here and into this region here. We would not want to route all the way around this edge, because if we do, then that neck plate will just be hanging in the air over that radius. So we want to bring that routing up to here and to here, and then we're good. Okay. Also around this back area where our electronics cover is going to be placed, remember our electronics cover is a piece of plywood. It doesn't bend. Okay. So we can't wrap it around a contour that you cut into here. Also, we don't want to remove any of this pocket where the electronics cover is going to be placed. So I want to leave that alone. On the top edge here, keep in mind that this is only about 1/8 of an inch thick of material right in here. So if you start cutting away material in here, you might cut right into the electronics pocket, right? So that's kind of an area that we want to definitely avoid. And then of course keep all of the area where our pickups and our bridge are going to be mounted, you know, all these screw holes and all of that, all of this area where the strings are going to be. We don't want to contour any of that, we want to leave that flat. So it's really just kind of around the periphery here. And you can see on Michelle's guitar right here, you can see the idea of the sculpting. You can see she chose not to really have an arm relief there, but she actually cut away quite a bit of material here already. There's a bit of a belly cut right here, right? So nothing is required. You don't have to do any sculpting if you don't want to, but generally that's preferred, and it adds to the comfort and kind of the unique. This is the place where your students can really get into the customization quite a bit and have some fun too. But we just have to be respectful of those no-fly zones, and we're going to be okay. So in preparation for doing the sculpting, what we'd want to do is just make some indications on the body lightly with pencil, never ink, lightly with pencil, where you might want to make some of the cuts. So like right here, I want to create a little arm relief right in here. So I'm holding it there, kind of where the guitar I want it to be, and I'm going to just mark a little pencil line there, and then on the sides here as well. I'm just marking some lines just roughly there. And what that does is as you're working with the tools and removing that wood and it's going away really fast, it gives you kind of a caution zone, saying, "Oop, I'm kind of getting close to where I want to be, and I need to stop and look at it and decide how much further I want to go." Without those lines there, you could just keep on going, you know, and you can't put it back, right? The wood is gone. And then also on your belly cut underneath, right? Same kind of a thing. Make your little mark. It can come in a lot deeper if you want, wherever you want to place that, and then also on the side here. So now we have some lines to give us some indication where we want to cut. Okay? So that's what I would recommend, you know, starting out just kind of sketching. I saw some people are already doing some of that kind of thing, and that's great. Just remember to always use pencil. I'm going to demonstrate some of the tools that you'll use just on on a piece of scrap wood here so we don't mess up this body. So we kind of have different levels of wood removal amounts that we can deal with. Probably the most aggressive is a grinder. So we have this angle grinder right here, and with this angle grinder we've got a wheel with some grit on here, some pretty heavy grit. This is actually intended for metal grinding. It works well on wood and kind of lasts forever on wood too. These are just cheap from Harbor Freight. Okay, and you can actually get an angle grinder at Harbor Freight for like 12 bucks too. So people are sometimes a little bit intimidated by them at first. We have colleagues that call them the wheel of death, but really they're not. If you use them properly, it's not a problem. One of the things that you want to be careful about is as you're holding it, just be careful that you have the guard where it's going to protect your knuckles, right? So this guard can turn around at different orientations and protect your knuckle that way. There is a handle that can go on right here. We don't really need that handle to get the amount of force that we need because we're just cutting wood. So really just kind of holding onto the barrel right here is good enough. You can also get sanding wheels, little sanding flapper wheels, so for more fine control, wood removal, that works as well. So these little flapper wheels right here can be used as well for sanding. So let me get some power going here. And with this particular angle grinder, the switch here, you kind of have to press it down and then in. When you initially turn it on, there's going to be some torque, right? It's going to try to fight back just a little bit, so just give it a firm grip. So, what kind of safety things do we need to worry about here? Hair, safety glasses, hair, jewelry, yeah. Right? Strings from your and earplugs if you want to do that. Face mask if you want. You saw it was shooting off a lot of stuff. You know, be courteous of the people that are next to you. Don't just shoot sawdust into their face. Right?
You got to be careful of this.
Yeah, we don't want to hurt the jaws of these specialty guitar vices at all. And you'll notice that when I was using the tool, I was pulling. Right? I was pulling. Don't push. You'll just engage that thing and cause a problem. So we're just pushing. We're pulling here. So you can see you can get a lot of wood out of there pretty quickly. That's why you want to have those marks on the body so that you don't go too far too fast, right? So it's pretty simple, not too scary. You know, just hold on to it tightly and you'll be fine. And always pull, you know, just kind of pull and sculpt along, right? The wood just kind of sculpts like butter with one of these tools. So that would be one way to get rid of material very quickly. We also have rasps, different types of rasps here that can be used as well. So if you want to go old school, right, this works just great. Right, so if you don't like that, grinder, this will work as well. It removes the material nicely, just a little bit slower, but maybe that's what you want, is a little slower, right? So we've got that. There's also this little rasp here. This is a Japanese style rasp. It has a coarse side and a fine side, and it's really nice. I love this rasp. And it removes some material nicely as well. And there's a fine side as well, so you can start rough and then go over to the fine. There's some files and some chisels, but I don't think you're going to need those for what we're doing here. One of the real fun tools that we have available to us is this Bladder Sander. And the bladder sander, we hook it up to a power drill. It has a bearing on this side, so we hold on to it on this side, and the bladder will spin. We call it a bladder because this is a rubber bladder full of air, and we have a sanding sleeve over the top of that. And there's a valve right on the inside here. We just pump that up to just firm, right? You don't want to overinflate this because as it heats up, of course, the air will expand, science lesson, and pop, big rubber pop sound. So, so we want to have a little bit of room for that heat expansion to happen on this. We've got pretty coarse sleeves on here, but you can get different grades of sandpaper, coarse to fine as well. These are available from Grizzly. That's a woodworking tool company, and I haven't found them anyplace else. That doesn't mean they don't exist anywhere else, but I just haven't found them there. So, and they chuck nicely. So with this guy, right, and so again, we got a rotating tool. All that safety stuff plays into it as well. And you can do it this way and have all that sawdust shoot back into your face, or you can reverse the drill, right? So what's nice is you get this nice smooth contour because, of course, this is flexing, right? So it's not creating a hard edge, it's creating a nice smooth edge. So these bladder sanders are really cool. We got 3 of those to share amongst us. Yeah, there's really not, I mean, anything that can go wrong with this other than overinflation, right? You just don't want to overinflate it. Maybe not get it too hot. If the wheel starts, if the sleeve starts to slip off the wheel a little bit and exposes this cloth right here, and you start grinding on that cloth, that's going to mess it up too. That's the only thing between the sleeve and the rubber bladder there. So we want to keep that sleeve on there and not sand over that cloth area. Okay, so that allows us now to start to get this thing down to a smoother finish, right? But still, this is still really, really rough. And so we still have a lot of work to do. The rest of the work that you're going to be doing will be with random orbital sanders is one option that you have available to you. So this is a disc, and it has a rubber pad on it, so it gives and kind of creates a little bit of organic shape as well. So we would sand with that. I'll go ahead and turn that on so you can see how that works. We have different grits of sandpaper. They attach with Velcro. Okay, so when if you want to have the sawdust somewhat go into this little container here, you got to line up the holes of the disc with the holes that are in the bottom of the sanding pad there too, and then it creates a little. Better, right? Getting better. So you start out with a rough grit sandpaper and then go down to finer and finer. I think we've got about 120 grit sandpaper. So when you're talking about sandpaper, for those of you that haven't used sandpaper before, when you go to a higher and higher number, that's coarser and coarser, right?
No.
Exactly opposite of that, right? So the higher the number, the more grains are in the square unit, whatever they're using for the square unit, right? So the more grains of sand are in there. So the higher the number, the more grains of sand. The lower the number, fewer grains of sand, and the bigger the grains of sand are. So therefore, it's going to cut more, right? So we want a nice low number for initially, and then we work up to a higher grade from there. We've been using machines now so far to kind of get it to this particular level. At this point then, we probably just switch over to hand sanding. We've got those black sanding pads, which are good, especially for those flat surfaces. And you can also just put the sandpaper in your hand and sand. always sanding with the grain. Okay, so when you're using the sandpaper, put some sandpaper there, right? We're always wanting to sand with the grain. If you go across the grain, you're just scratching the wood, and you're going to have to sand more to get those scratches out, okay? So you're defeating the purpose there. So we're always sanding here with the grain, either with the sanding pad or by hand here. And again, we start working with the rougher sandpaper, and gradually, you probably want to get this thing down before you put finish on tonight to, I'd say about the 320, right? At least 220, probably 320 level for the sandpaper. And that means all of the surfaces of the guitar, all of the outside surfaces. You don't need to sand the insides of the pockets, the inside of the electronics, or anything like that. And definitely do not sand anywhere inside the neck pocket. No go, because we've already fit our neck beautifully into that, and we don't want to mess that connection at all. Okay, so by the end of the day, when we're ready to put finish on, we've sanded, we've sculpted the body, we've sanded it down. In particular, pay attention to these areas here, which we call the end grain. It's the end, you've got the grain of the wood running this direction. So this is the end grain, it's the hardest to sand. Look in particular for burn marks from the tools that were used to cut this initially. Some of you had on your headstocks. You showed me and said, yeah, what do you think? And I said, well, there's all these burn marks on the side. It's perfectly smooth, but those burn marks are going to show through with the finish. So we want to get all of those machine burn marks off of there, and get all of these fuzzies, not all these little fuzzies that are left over. The tool that cut this out just kind of left those little fuzzies there. What I recommend is when you've got this thing sanded down all the way to the bitter end and you're ready to put the finish on, then what I like to do is just get a little damp paper towel and wipe down the whole finish. Not wet, just damp paper towel, wipe down the whole finish. What that does is it takes all the little wood fibers and makes them stand up. They swell, right? The wood fibers swell up and they stand up. And so then one more pass with your sandpaper will knock down all those little fibers. Then when you put on your finish, there's less of those that are going to want to try to swell and stand up. So that's kind of your last little step there, is just a little bit of dampness on there and sand that off, and then you're good to go. But don't hold it under the sink, right? Because then the body will be too wet to apply finish to. So just a little damp towel and clean that up. Okay. So what we're going to do is work on the guitar bodies. If you've got a lot of material to remove, like this one over here, you might want to use the bandsaw first, right? If you want to sculpt the whole thing a little bit smaller. Don't try to sand off all of that material, bandsaw off the big chunks, and then start to sculpt it. Okay? So we'll do that for a little while. We will interrupt you in the middle of that process to introduce to you another process in just a little while. But we want you to kind of get started on this first, and then we'll throw more fun stuff at you. Okay? All right.